Ethan Montgomery had always been content with his simple life. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, he leaned against the weathered fence surrounding his small farm, watching the golden fields of wheat sway gently in the evening breeze. His hands, rough from years of working the land, gripped the wooden post as his eyes scanned the open fields. The world around him was quiet, peaceful, untouched by the chaos and noise of the galaxy beyond. The stars, just beginning to twinkle in the vast night sky, reminded him that he was far from the bustling cities of his home planet Earth. Here, on this patch of land, he was just another farmer, living out a quiet existence. But that was all about to change. Ethan's farm had been passed down through his family for generations, and it was all he had ever known. His father had taught him the ways of the land, showing him how to plant the crops, raise the cattle, and care for the soil. Every season, like clockwork, Ethan would follow the same routine, reaping the fruits of his labor and living a life free from complication. He had no desire for fame, riches, or recognition, just the satisfaction of a good day's work. That evening, however, as he worked late into the night, he unknowingly set events in motion that would shake the very foundations of the universe. He had been digging a new irrigation trench for his crops when his shovel struck something hard beneath the earth. At first he thought it was just a rock, something that could easily be dealt with. But as he dug deeper, the object revealed itself to be something far more intricate, a metallic surface, smooth and cold, unlike anything he had ever seen before. Curiosity stirred within him. The metal was covered in strange markings, symbols that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own. Ethan paused, brushing the dirt from the surface, marveling at the craftsmanship. It looked ancient, older than anything on Earth. But how could that be? His farm had been here for generations, and no one had ever mentioned anything about such a relic buried beneath the soil. Against his better judgment, Ethan reached out and touched the surface of the object. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through his body, and the ground beneath him trembled. For a brief second, everything around him seemed to flicker, as if reality itself was bending. He stumbled back in shock, his heart racing. The ground settled, and everything went still again. But something had changed. Something had shifted. As he stood there, trying to make sense of what had just happened, a low hum emanated from the object, growing louder by the second. Ethan's pulse quickened. He wanted to run, to leave the strange relic alone. But he couldn't. Something about it seemed to call to him, urging him to stay, to understand. His mind raced, wondering what he had unleashed. Unbeknownst to Ethan, the moment he had activated the relic, it sent out a signal, an ancient, encrypted message that traveled across the stars, far beyond the reach of any human or earthling. The signal reached the Ralnok, a race of beings known for their strict control over the galaxy. The Ralnok were not like the humans. Immense in size and power, their civilization had ruled over many worlds, enforcing their laws with an iron grip. They had observed humanity for millennia, watching from the shadows, ensuring that humans remained on their path and did not interfere with the greater order of the galaxy. But now, with the relic activated, the balance was disrupted. On their homeworld, far from Earth, the Ralnok leaders gathered in their high council chambers. The room was filled with towering figures, their voices echoing with authority as they discussed matters of great importance. When the signal from the relic reached them, a deep silence fell over the room. The supreme leader, a massive being known as Cormac, rose from his seat, his glowing eyes fixed on the projection that had appeared before them.
"A human has activated the relic," Cormac rumbled, his voice resonating with power.
"This is forbidden." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief.
The relic, long thought to be lost to time, was an artifact of great significance.
It was a symbol of the old wars, a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of altering the very fabric of space and time. For a human to have found it was not just an accident. It was a violation of the highest order. "We must act quickly," Cormac continued. "The law must be upheld." the human must be found and brought to trial. If not, the galaxy itself could be at risk. A murmur rippled through the council, and the decision was made. The Ralnok would dispatch their elite forces to Earth. The human who had activated the relic would be taken, and their fate would be decided by the ancient laws of the Ralnok. Back on Earth, Ethan had no idea what he had just set in motion. As he sat on the ground, staring at the relic, his mind raced. The hum of the object had faded, and now there was nothing but silence. He stood, dusting off his hands, his thoughts consumed with questions. What had he unleashed? And why did it feel like the world itself was holding its breath? The next morning, Ethan awoke to the sound of a low rumble in the distance. It was like nothing he had ever heard before, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the earth. He stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the early morning sun, and looked toward the horizon. In the distance, he saw something large, moving across the sky. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't an airplane. It wasn't a bird. It was something else. A massive ship, unlike anything he had ever seen. It was sleek, dark, and humming with a low mechanical whir. As it drew closer, Ethan felt a surge of panic rise within him. The ship was heading straight for his farm. It was coming for him. Before he could react, a loud voice echoed through the air, carried by some unseen force. It was not a voice from Earth, but something far more alien, far more menacing. Human, the voice boomed. You have violated the sacred laws of the Ralnok. Surrender now or face the consequences. Ethan's legs shook, and for the first time in his life he felt the weight of something far greater than anything he could understand. The voice, though distant, seemed to reach deep into his bones, rattling him to his core. He took a step back, his mind racing. The ground beneath him trembled again, this time with more intensity. Suddenly, a bright light burst from the ship, and a beam of energy shot down, striking the ground mere yards from where Ethan stood. He jumped back, heart pounding, his eyes wide with disbelief. What was happening? Who were these beings? And why had they come to his world? The ship hovered above the ground, its massive size casting a long shadow over Ethan's farm. The hum grew louder, and he could feel the air around him growing thick, charged with an unnatural energy. Panic set in, as Ethan realized he had no way of defending himself. He was just a farmer. What could he possibly do against these creatures? Then, the ship's door opened, and a figure descended from the craft. It was tall, towering, and as it approached, Ethan could see its glowing eyes, its strange armor, and its alien features. The being moved with purpose, its steps heavy and deliberate. It stopped before Ethan, towering over him as its voice echoed in his mind. "You are the one," it said, "the one who broke the law." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. He could hardly breathe, let alone respond. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. He had done nothing wrong. At least, he hadn't meant to. He was just a farmer, a simple man, but it was too late for apologies. The galaxy was already responding. And Ethan Montgomery, the simple farmer, was about to learn that there were forces beyond his comprehension, watching from the stars. Ethan stood frozen in place, his mind spinning. The towering alien before him, clad in shimmering armor that seemed to hum with power, towered over him. The creature's glowing eyes bore into him, as if it could read every thought that flitted through his mind. Ethan's breath came in shallow gasps as he struggled to find words. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, trying to back away, his legs unsteady beneath him. His mind raced, grasping for anything that could explain this situation. A spaceship hovering above his farm, and now this massive alien being demanding something he didn't understand. It was too much. The alien's voice was calm, but laced with authority. The laws of the Ralnok are ancient and sacred. You have activated the relic, a forbidden artifact of immense power. Its activation by a human is a violation, and you will face the consequences. Ethan's eyes widened in confusion. Relic? Forbidden artifact? He had no idea what the alien was talking about. All he had done was dig a trench and find something buried beneath the earth. He hadn't known it was anything important, but now, with the alien standing before him, the gravity of the situation was sinking in. His farm, his peaceful life, had been shattered by something he couldn't even comprehend. "Please, I didn't know," Ethan pleaded, his voice rising in desperation. "I'm just a farmer." "Don't even know what this relic is." I found it by accident." The alien seemed to consider his words for a moment, then shook its head. "Ignorance is no excuse," it said in a deep, resonant voice that vibrated through the air. "The galaxy has rules. You have disrupted them, and now you will answer for your actions." Before Ethan could respond, the alien raised its hand, and the air around them seemed to shift. Ethan felt a strange pressure building in his chest, and then, without warning, the ground beneath him trembled. He stumbled, falling to his knees as the alien lifted him effortlessly into the air with a wave of its hand. The force was unlike anything he had ever felt, as if gravity itself had changed its rules. "Come with me," the alien commanded, its voice leaving no room for argument. Ethan had no choice but to obey, his heart pounding as he was lifted from the earth and drawn toward the waiting ship. It felt like the world around him had become a blur, the ground far below him and the massive ship growing ever closer. He didn't know where he was going, but his instincts told him it wouldn't be a place where he would find safety or answers. The ship's door opened with a hiss, revealing an interior that was sleek and otherworldly. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, filled with smooth metal surfaces, strange lights, and an atmosphere that hummed with energy. The walls seemed to pulse with a low, steady rhythm, almost like the heartbeat of the ship itself. He was pushed forward, still floating in the alien's grasp, until he was brought to a large, empty room at the center of the craft. Once inside, the alien released him, and he fell to his knees, gasping for breath as he regained his balance. The door to the room sealed behind him with a quiet thud. There were no windows, no way of seeing the outside world. Ethan was trapped. "You will be held here until the Ralnok decide your fate," the alien said, turning to leave. "Do not attempt to escape."
"There is nowhere you can go."
As the door closed behind the alien, Ethan found himself alone in the stark, metallic room. His mind was racing. How had this happened? How had a simple mistake led to him being taken aboard an alien ship? He felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The Ralnok, whoever they were, had obviously ruled this part of the galaxy for a long time, and their power was not something he could ignore. He had no idea what would happen to him next, but the thought of facing these powerful beings in their own realm filled him with dread. As the hours passed, Ethan sat on the cold floor, trying to make sense of everything. His mind kept returning to the relic he had uncovered, the strange object buried beneath his land. What was it? How had it come to be there? And why had it triggered such a violent response from the galaxy? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. The door to the room opened once again, and the same towering alien entered. This time, however, it was not alone. A second figure stood behind it, an alien whose skin shimmered with an ethereal glow, its body slender and graceful, its eyes a deep shade of violet. "Ethan Montgomery," the new alien said, its voice soft but laced with an undeniable authority. "We are the Council of the Ralnok. You stand accused of violating the sacred laws of our people. You are guilty of activating the relic, an artifact of ancient power forbidden to all." Ethan stood, his legs shaky from being confined to the floor for so long.
"I didn't mean to break any laws," he said again, his voice trembling.
"I didn't even know what I found. I'm just a farmer trying to make a living. Please, you have to believe me." The council member, who seemed to be the more senior of the two, stepped forward. Its eyes glowed brighter as it regarded him, its expression unreadable.
"Ignorance of the law does not absolve you of your actions, human."
"The relic you discovered was sealed away for a reason. It holds power that is not meant for your kind to wield. You and those like you must be held accountable." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing for any way to get through to them. What happens now?
"What will you do with me?"
The first alien, the one who had captured him earlier, glared at him with disdain.
"You will be judged. If the council deems you a threat, you will be dealt with.
If they find you worthy, you may live, but you will be imprisoned for the rest of your days to ensure that you do not disrupt the peace of the galaxy again." Ethan's stomach dropped. Imprisoned? For life? He had barely even started to understand what had happened, and now his entire future was in their hands. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice thick with frustration. "What harm could one person do? I'm not part of your galaxy. I don't even understand what you want from me." The council member spoke again, this time with more patience, though the coldness of its words didn't change. "You are a human, and humans are unpredictable. The relic you discovered is far too dangerous to be in the hands of one who doesn't understand it. It could unravel the very fabric of space-time, bring about a new war, or tear the galaxy apart. The Ralnok cannot allow such recklessness." Ethan's heart sank. He had never meant for any of this to happen. He was just a farmer, a simple man living a quiet life on his small patch of land. Now he had inadvertently put the entire galaxy at risk. The weight of that realization settled heavily on his shoulders.
"You will be taken to the Ralnok capital." The second alien spoke again, its voice soft but firm. "There you will face judgment. We will determine if you are a danger to the galaxy, and if so, what must be done with you."
Ethan nodded, his mind still struggling to comprehend what had happened. He wanted to scream, to shout, that it wasn't fair, that he didn't deserve this, but he knew, deep down, that the Ralnok weren't interested in fairness. They were concerned with power, control, and order. As the door opened and the two aliens began to guide him out of the room, Ethan took one last look around. He didn't know where they were taking him, but he knew it wouldn't be back to his farm. His life had been torn apart, and in its place, a new, terrifying reality had emerged, one that he wasn't sure he could survive. Ethan's journey aboard the alien ship seemed endless. For days he had been confined to a small, sterile room with only the hum of the ship to keep him company. His mind kept racing, replaying the events that had brought him here, finding the relic, the alien's arrival, and the cold, impersonal way he had been captured. There was no escape, no way to go back to his farm, to the quiet life he had known. The galaxy, it seemed, had come for him. Each day, one of the Ralnok would come to his cell offering no comfort, only commands. He had learned little about his captors during these brief encounters. The Ralnok were a proud and ancient race, and their power seemed to reach across the stars, enforcing their laws with ruthless precision. They did not show mercy, and they did not care for explanations. Ethan had tried pleading with them, explaining that he hadn't meant to break any laws, but each time the response was the same: "Ignorance does not excuse you." The days blurred together, and Ethan's mind began to crack under the weight of his confinement. He had never felt so alone, so small, surrounded by beings who were so far beyond him in knowledge, power, and understanding. The alien ship moved at unimaginable speeds, cutting through space like a predator stalking its prey. But no matter how fast it traveled, it never seemed to get any closer to the end of this nightmare. One evening, when the ship's lights dimmed to a soft glow, the door to his cell opened. Ethan stood up from the cot he had been lying on, his muscles stiff from lack of movement. He had almost forgotten the world beyond this small room, and the presence of another Ralnoke was enough to make him feel like a trapped animal. The alien before him was different from the others, taller, broader, its armor gleaming under the soft lights. Its glowing eyes narrowed as it stepped closer, observing Ethan with an intensity that made him shiver. He stood, facing the being as the door closed behind it, and he waited. What would this one want? You are to be moved, the alien said, its voice a low, rumbling tone. The council has decided. You will be taken to the Ralnock capital, where your fate will be determined. Ethan's heart raced. Am I going to be executed? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He had heard nothing but whispers of execution and punishment since he had arrived, and he had no idea what to expect. His thoughts were clouded with fear. The alien gave no sign of answering his question. Instead, it gestured for him to follow, and Ethan hesitated for only a moment before he complied. The hallways were long and unending, filled with cold, alien metal that stretched in every direction. The ship was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. There were no windows, no signs of life outside, only the constant hum of machinery that kept the ship alive. He was led through the corridors by the alien, who seemed to glide effortlessly across the ship. Ethan had no choice but to follow, his feet dragging with each step. The further they went, the more he felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He was far from Earth, far from the life he had once known, and he had no idea how he could ever return to that life, if such a thing was even possible. Eventually, they reached a large chamber, its walls adorned with strange, pulsating lights. In the center of the room stood a platform, its surface smooth and reflective. It looked like a place of judgment, a place where decisions were made, and Ethan's stomach twisted at the thought of what was to come. He was shoved forward, the alien behind him nudging him toward the platform. Without warning, the floor beneath him began to glow, and Ethan felt the familiar pressure in the air, as if the entire room was watching him. He turned his head to see the alien standing at the doorway, but it made no move to approach. The chamber grew quiet. For the first time in days, Ethan was left alone with his thoughts. His hands trembled, and his breath came in quick, shallow bursts. He knew the Ralnock were powerful, and he knew they had rules that humans were not allowed to break. But was he truly a threat? Was his mistake so unforgivable that it warranted the end of his life? The weight of the situation hung heavily on him, and there seemed to be no way out. Then, from the shadows at the far end of the room, a figure stepped forward. It was not another alien. This one was different. Smaller in stature, but exuding an air of quiet authority. The figure moved with purpose. As it drew closer, Ethan saw that it was another being, not a Ralnock, but someone else, someone from a different species. The being wore a long, flowing cloak, its face hidden beneath a hood. All Ethan could see were the glowing eyes that regarded him with what seemed to be curiosity, or perhaps judgment. Human. The voice was soft, yet it resonated in the stillness of the room. Do you know why you are here?
Ethan didn't speak at first. He couldn't.
His throat felt tight, and his words seemed to falter. But the figure stepped closer, and Ethan was finally able to shake his head. I don't know, he said, his voice a whisper. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't know what I had found. I didn't know I was breaking the law. The figure was silent for a moment. Then, in a voice that was much colder than before, it spoke again. You have activated a weapon of great power. The relic you uncovered was not meant for your kind. The consequences of your actions could be disastrous. Do you understand that now? Ethan nodded slowly. Yes, he said, his voice trembling. I understand. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just found it.
I didn't know. The figure seemed to contemplate his words for a long time, and Ethan felt as though his fate was hanging by a thread.
Would they show him mercy? Or would they execute him for a crime he didn't even understand? Finally, the figure spoke again, this time with a soft sigh. You are not the first human to make this mistake. But you are the first to be caught. Caught. The word struck Ethan like a blow. He had been so careful, so oblivious to the fact that his actions had consequences, and now he was caught in the web of a galaxy he didn't understand, a galaxy that seemed indifferent to his existence. Perhaps, the figure continued, there is another way. Perhaps we do not need to destroy you, but we must see if you are worthy.
Worthy of what?
Ethan asked, his voice filled with uncertainty.
Worthy of understanding the power you have unleashed,
the figure said. Worthy of helping us prevent further chaos. If you do not prove yourself, you will be silenced. Ethan's mind spun. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. It felt like a dream, a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. How could he prove anything? He had no knowledge of the relic, no understanding of the laws of the galaxy. He was just a farmer, and all he had wanted was a simple life.
You will be tested, the figure said, its eyes glowing brighter now. We will see if you can be of use to us.
If you succeed, you will be allowed to live, but you will never return to your home. You will serve the galaxy, and you will help us maintain order. The figure stepped back, and the chamber grew silent once more. Ethan was left standing alone, his thoughts racing. A test. He had no idea what that would mean, but he knew one thing for certain. His life had changed forever. The galaxy, with its unyielding rules and its ancient power, had claimed him. And now, he was at its mercy. Ethan stood in the cold, sterile chamber, his mind still reeling from the words of the mysterious figure who had spoken to him. The notion of being tested, of having his fate determined by forces far beyond his comprehension, weighed heavily on him. He was a simple man, a farmer with no experience in politics, no knowledge of the ancient laws of the galaxy, and no idea how he could possibly prove himself worthy. He had never asked for any of this, but now there was no turning back. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the ship's systems. He stood there, trying to steady his breath, trying to push aside the growing sense of hopelessness that threatened to overwhelm him. It felt as if the walls were closing in on him, as if the entire weight of the galaxy was bearing down on his shoulders. Time seemed to stretch on forever before the door to the chamber opened once again. Ethan turned, his heart racing. But this time, it wasn't the alien he had come to fear. A new figure entered, one who seemed smaller, but no less imposing. The figure wore a simple cloak, its face hidden in shadow, but there was something in the way it moved that made Ethan feel as though this being was not to be underestimated. Human, the figure said, its voice calm yet filled with an authority that made Ethan's skin prickle.
You are to follow me. The time for your test has come.
Ethan had no choice but to obey. He nodded, his feet moving without thinking, and followed the figure through the dimly lit corridors of the ship. As they walked, he couldn't help but feel that the ship was alive. Its walls seemed to pulse with energy, its very presence radiating a sense of purpose. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and the thought that he might never see Earth again made his heart ache. The figure led him to another chamber, much larger than the one he had been held in. The room was filled with strange floating symbols, and in the center a platform stood, bathed in a soft glowing light. Ethan was ushered forward, and as he stepped onto the platform, he felt a sudden jolt, a strange energy coursing through his body, as if the room itself was testing him. The figure stepped back, watching him closely. Ethan could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. What was this test? What did they want from him? His mind raced, but no answers came. The platform beneath him began to shift, its surface glowing brighter as it started to rise. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as the floor beneath him disappeared, and he was lifted higher and higher into the air. The room around him blurred, and the feeling of weightlessness made his stomach churn. He had no idea what was happening, but he couldn't stop it. At the top of the platform, Ethan was suddenly plunged into darkness. The lights around him flickered and went out, and for a moment he was surrounded by nothing but blackness. His breath came fast, panic rising in his chest. What had happened? Was this the end? But then the lights returned, bright, blinding. He squinted, trying to make sense of the scene before him. He was no longer in the chamber, but in a vast open space, an alien landscape unlike anything he had ever seen. The ground beneath his feet was smooth and metallic, stretching out into the distance. Above him, the sky was a deep shade of violet, with swirling clouds that seemed to move of their own accord. Ethan could barely take in his surroundings before a new figure appeared before him. This one was not an alien, but a human. A man dressed in tattered clothing, his face weary, his eyes full of sadness. He looked at Ethan with a mix of pity and something else, something harder to identify. "Welcome to your test," the man said, his voice rough as though he had been speaking for a long time. "You are here because you have broken a law that you did not understand. You are here because the galaxy demands that you answer for your actions. But first, you must prove yourself worthy." Ethan took a step back, confused. Worthy of what? I didn't mean to break the law. I didn't mean any harm. The man didn't respond at first. Instead, he reached into his cloak and pulled out a small device, an orb, glowing with a soft inner light. "This is the relic," the man said, his voice heavy with the weight of the words. "The very artifact you uncovered. It holds the key to your test. It holds the key to your fate." The orb floated in front of Ethan, spinning slowly. As it did, Ethan felt a strange pull, a force drawing him toward it. He couldn't explain it, but the relic seemed to call to him, as if it recognized something within him. The pressure in the air grew stronger, the energy around him intensifying. "You will face 3 challenges," the man continued, his voice now carrying an almost mournful tone. "Each one will test your strength, your resolve, and your understanding of the power you have unleashed. Fail, and the galaxy will decide your fate. Succeed, and you will earn your place among the stars." Ethan's thoughts swirled. 3 challenges. He had no idea what those challenges would be, but he knew one thing. Failure wasn't an option. The thought of being punished, of being erased from existence for a mistake he didn't even understand, was more than he could bear. He had to succeed, no matter the cost. "How do I begin?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. The man gave a slow nod, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "The first challenge begins now." Before Ethan could react, the world around him shifted again. The ground beneath his feet began to tremble, and the air grew thick with energy. From the horizon, a massive creature appeared, its body towering over him, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It was a creature unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, a beast with scales like metal, sharp claws, and a roar that shook the very earth beneath him. The man's voice echoed in his mind. "You must defeat this creature, or you will fail. Only by facing it can you prove your worth." Ethan's heart raced as the creature charged toward him. He had never fought anything like this before. He was a farmer, not a warrior. But instinct took over, and Ethan began to run, his feet pounding against the metallic ground. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his wits and his will to survive. The creature was fast, faster than anything he had ever encountered, and its growl sent chills through his spine. He dodged its first strike, leaping to the side as the creature's claws slashed through the air, barely missing him. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps as he scrambled to find a way to fight back. There had to be something, anything, that he could use to defend himself. The creature lunged again, but this time, Ethan was ready. He grabbed a nearby piece of metal, a jagged shard that had broken off from the ground, and swung it at the creature with all his might. The shard hit its target, one of the creature's eyes, and it let out a deafening roar of pain. The creature staggered back, its glowing eye now dripping with a strange, dark fluid. But it wasn't finished. It came at Ethan with renewed fury, and he knew he had to act fast. The relic, the strange glowing orb, still hovered before him, and he reached out, his fingers brushing against it. As he touched the orb, a surge of energy rushed through him, filling him with an unfamiliar power. The creature charged again, but this time Ethan was ready. With the power of the relic coursing through him, he summoned the strength to stand his ground. The creature's claws came down, but Ethan was faster now. He dodged the attack and, with a single powerful strike, drove the metal shard deep into the creature's chest. The beast let out a final, strangled roar before it crumpled to the ground. Lifeless, Ethan stood over it, his chest heaving, his mind still reeling from the surge of power that had overtaken him. He had done it. He had faced the creature and won. But what would come next? The man appeared again, his expression unreadable. You have passed the first challenge, but the second will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't back down. He had survived the first challenge, and he would survive the next. There was no turning back now.